Welcome to the Flex Rental Solutions webinar. Today we're going to continue with our Back to Basics series and kind of wrap up the inventory section by talking about virtual items. So virtual items are a lot like what they sound. They are virtual, not actual physical inventory items that you might have in your inventory tree. Some examples of this might be things like packages and kits. So for example, I have a breakout room package here. I think I even have a screen package here that's a virtual item, a mic package, and things like that. So there are some very basic ways that you can build your virtual items, and then there's some more complicated ways that we'll look at a little bit later in this webinar. But let's just start with the very basics. I think a very good basic example would be something like a speaker package. So let's go to our inventory menu, click New Inventory Item. And let's just say that this is a 4-speaker package. And remember, the item name is what's going to show up on a quote. Item short name is what shows up over here in the inventory tree. If I leave this blank, it will just inherit whatever the item name is. The important part is, well, before I do that, let's add it to a group. So I want to say, maybe let's just put this in our generic packages and kits folder. But the important part is that I want to choose a preset that's either a virtual model or a virtual package. The main difference between the two is that a virtual package is going to be made up of contents or items that go onto a quote every time I add this item to a quote. So a virtual package is more a set package that's going to have pretty much the same stuff every time. Whereas a virtual model is built primarily out of suggestions. And so a virtual model might be something more like something that changes every time I put it on a quote, or something that I just want to be able to pick and choose what I'm putting into that virtual item instead of like in a virtual package where it's the same every time. So in this case, we want it to be a virtual package because it's a 4-speaker package. So I'm going to be sending 4 speakers and all of the things that need to go to make a 4-speaker package every single time, and that's not really going to change. I don't really need to put much else in here. There's not really a replacement cost for a virtual item. The replacement cost will be calculated by the items I put in the package. I guess I could put an icon and some of these other things, but because this is virtual, I can't really put a weight in there either because the weight's going to be determined by the individual items. I suppose I could put some notes in there, maybe a description of what this package is, but for the most part, you're really not going to be filling in much more besides the item name, primary group, and what its preset is. So here's what you'll notice. Once I created this item, and it brings me to the item or the model page, notice that I have this contents tab here now. The contents is just going to be, what are the contents of this package? What are the things that always go onto a quote whenever you put this item onto a quote? And in this case, it's going to be 4 speakers, maybe some stands, a mixer, cables, everything that needs to go with this package to make it a full 4-speaker package. So let's start and just say that for my 4-speaker package, the item that I own the most of is maybe these Mackie 450s. So when I say a 4-speaker package, I know that that is going to go with Mackie 450s. Let's just go down the list here. I probably also want to include a mixer. I'll just say a simple 12-channel mixer. Might want to include a microphone. Go down and find our cabling. Mackie 450s use XLR since they're self-powered. So we'll just say, let's maybe send 410s, 625s, 450s and 4 100s. Or, sorry, that was the 10s. And I could put some other things in here too. I could put stands. I don't think I have any stands set up in this system, so I'm not going to spend time trying to build that live here, but I could put really anything else in there that I need to. I could put some sort of tools in there if I need to, or just any other, maybe adapters, things like that. I could just drag and drop into the contents of this virtual package. And now let's look at what that looks like when we put it onto a quote. So we'll just say that this is a webinar test. Give it some dates. And I add virtual items to a quote just the same as adding a normal item to a quote. I could just drag and drop. And let's say I just need one. And that's automatically going to add all of the different items that I put into that package. And if any items have their own contents, those will show up as child of child items, etc. So that's a very basic package. Let's look at a couple other things that might be a little bit more complicated. To me, this ULXD wireless mic package is a good example. Because number one, we're talking about having a virtual item that will automatically load or put onto a quote all of the different items that are included in this package. But in this particular case, we're also looking at the case that these items go in. Remember our last webinar? I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, but when we were talking about packages and containers, we were talking about how you can set up a specific item to be a container that will have other items inside of it. So like our ULXD case is set up as a serialized storage item, which means that I can open any of these barcodes and actually scan items into this case. So now when it comes to the ULXD wireless mic package, what I did was in the contents, I just set this up as a normal virtual package. In the contents, I put all the items that the customer would get, so it will list off and show them what they're getting as part of this package. And then I also put the case in there. Because remember, when you create a pull sheet, if the case isn't on the pull sheet, then when you try to scan that case, Flex is going to give you a warning that says this item's not on the list. Are you sure you want to add it? And it can just get kind of annoying if you are constantly getting that prompt. So what we did is we put the case into the virtual package contents so that when we add this to a quote, it's going to add that case to the quote so that when I create a pull sheet, it's going to add to the pull sheet as well. So I could scan that case without having to worry about constantly getting that prompt. So that's just a nice little a bonus that you could do as you're setting up some of these wireless or some of these virtual packages, is to put in not just the items that the customer knows that they're going to get, but the items that you know you have to send, whether or not that might include a case. Let's turn back to our speaker package for a second, because I bet some of you are thinking right now, well, that's all well and good that you have all these contents, but what if I want to use this speaker package, but I want to send a 16-channel mixer instead of the 12? Or maybe I want to send additional microphones. So what you can do is kind of set up a hybrid of contents and suggestions. So we keep this as a virtual package because we still want the contents tab. But we might take a few things out that aren't necessarily going to be items that always go with that package. We might even do that with the XLR cable. So we might get to the point where the only things that always go with it are going to be the speakers, the stands, IEC cables, the cases for the speakers, and maybe a couple other things that you know will go with it every single time. But then for those other items, you could go over to the Suggestions tab and say, what are all the mixers that I could possibly send with this package? I could send a 12-channel, either of my 12 channels. I could send a 16-channel. I could even send some of my digital mixers if I want, depending on what the kind of job is. I could send a beta 58, 57, a normal 58. Notice I'm putting all these in just a one quantity, but I could change those quantities once I get to the suggestions on the quote. Same with my XLR. I'm just putting it as a one quantity, but I might change those quantities once I get to the actual adding on the quote. So what does this look like now? Let's go to our quote, and let's just take everything off, and we'll start from scratch. And I want to add this 4-speaker package. See what it does? It just adds the thing that I had as a content, but the rest of it pops up in my suggestions window. So for this one, I choose the 16-channel mixer. Maybe I want a beta 58 and I want 4 regular 58s. So that means I'm going to need a little bit more XLR. So let's do 6 10s, maybe 10 25s, 6 50s, 4 100s. Notice too, as I change quantities, it automatically checks the box here. And then also look over here at the relation type and included in price, yes or no. We'll look at this a little bit more in 5 or so minutes, but this will let you choose how do you want this to add to this package. Right now, if it adds as next sibling, it's just going to add as the next line item. It'll be indented at the same distance as 4-speaker package. But maybe I want to add everything as a child line item because I want it to look like it's included in the package. So I could come over here and say, add this as child. I want all of these to be added as a child. One thing that we will lose by doing this ignore that. You don't lose anything with that. But that's kind of what it looks like now, is we have a 4-speaker package, and here are all the things that I added as suggestions because I chose as child for the relationship type. So some people might even want to take this whole idea of a speaker package even further and say, well, I don't know what kind of speakers I'm even going to send in a 4-speaker package. I don't even know if it's going to be a 4-speaker package. I just want to build a speaker package with all of the different options that I have for speakers. So in that case, what we did was we built this item that's called a speaker package builder. And this is where it starts getting a little bit more fun. Notice that the speaker package builder is set up as a virtual model. Remember the difference? Virtual package means that there are contents that automatically go with this item every time. Virtual model, it takes away that idea of content. So all we have is suggestions, no contents tab. And then look what we did with the contents. We included every possible type of speaker, even my line array speakers, subwoofers, and all of that. I put in all my different types of microphones that could go with it, all the different types of XLR cable. So it's a lot like the example I just showed where you had some contents but some suggestions, except this time it's just all suggestions. Because maybe when I'm building this speaker package, I want to use QSCs. Or maybe it's a smaller room, I would just want to use some Mackie 350s instead. Maybe I want to use any number of these different types of mixers. Maybe I need to use 2 mixers, so I want to use this one and this one. The idea is that we just put all of the different possible items that you could use into the suggestions so that when you drag and drop this onto a quote, it's going to let you choose which items you use. Here's one thing that I recommend to a lot of people when you're setting up an item like this. I like to say line mute by default is yes, or give it a better name. So in this case, I said the item name is speaker package contains the following, or I could just call it speaker package, and that's going to be the parent line item that the customer sees, and then all the items that I choose will show up underneath it. But I keep builder over here just because I want it to show up as a speaker package builder in my inventory tree. Remember, item short name is how it appears in the inventory tree. And I want people to know who are actually building the quotes. I want them to know that this is a speaker package builder. That means that the suggestions window is going to pop up and they're going to build this from all those suggestions. So yeah, just two ways to do that. You could either line mute this item so that the customer never really sees it. It'll still show up on the quote, but when you print a PDF, if it's line muted, it won't show. Or just give it a better name that's a little bit more quote friendly. Because if your customer sees speaker package builder, that might kind of confuse them. So they just might want to see speaker package or speaker package contains the following or something like that. Let's also look at one more thing, and that's that we call suggestion types. Suggestion types are certain groups that you can add each line item to, and these groups are going to determine how those items are added to the quote. Let me show you what that means. Remember earlier when we added that for speaker package and it had these options over here. If I choose this line, do I want to add it as the next sibling or as a child or use the default sort method? So like if it's in auto sort mode, this line item would automatically sort into whatever group it belongs to. And also included in price, yes or no. Do I want this item to be included in the price? And if I check that box, it will zero out whatever default price for this item. What suggestion types can do is automatically set those preferences for you for this particular package. So what I mean is I included all my speakers, or I assigned all my speakers to be included in the speaker's suggestion type. If we go to the inventory menu and click suggestion types, and let's look at our speaker suggestion type, notice that by default I have it adding as next sibling and included in price no. But if I were to come in here and say by default I want anything that belongs to the speaker's suggestion type to add as child, and let's still say that it's not included in price. Look at what happens now. When I go to add this speaker package builder to a quote, and it's going to pop up my suggestions window, and I go to the speakers tab, look at that. The relationship type by default now is add as child. Doesn't look like I've done that to any of my other suggestion types, like signal cable is, but my mixers don't even belong to a suggestion type right now, and my microphones are all adding as next sibling too. So let's go back to inventory, suggestion types. Let's first go to microphones. And I want this by default to add as child. And then mixers too. Let's go to mixers and say that these by default add as child. And then go back to my speaker package builder and notice I haven't assigned any of my mixers to a suggestion type yet. So all I have to do is just click that pencil icon, choose which suggestion type, and click update. And unfortunately at this point you have to do those one by one. Been in our big rewrite of Flex, the Flex 5 rewrite, we're hoping to put in some more things like bulk editing suggestion types and stuff like that. We're just trying to look at all these little things that take up a lot of your time as you're using Flex and trying to improve that, and I think that could be a pretty good one. So I've assigned these to a suggestion type. I could click update if I want. Let's also do this too, because I just noticed that I have some passive speakers in this as well. So what I would want to do is come down and look at my NL4 or NL8 cable. You know what, I don't have any in my system anyway, but what I was going to do is drag and drop those in here, create a new suggestion type for a speaker cable, so that when I put this item on a quote, I would have a tab for speaker cable and I could choose those if I needed to. But I don't want to take up time for this webinar to create all those new items, so we'll just not do that for now. But let's go back and see what this looks like. I'm going to delete everything on this quote first. And we just want to look at that speaker package builder and kind of how that helps us now. I'm just going to add one. I don't really need more than one because I'm choosing the quantities from the suggestions window. And see, notice too that everything I added or assigned to a suggestion type gets put into its own suggestion type tab, which is really nice for organization purposes. But I could come through here and say, well, I want to choose this type of speaker. It's a pretty big room, so I'm going to send 8. I might even send a couple smaller ones as like delay speakers or something like that, stage monitors. I want 6 SM58s. I could have even put my wireless mic package in here to choose that. For a mixer, it's going to be a little bit bigger, so let's do an X32. I want all my signal cable and then choose the quantities here. And remember, because I assigned all of these to suggestion types, and because the suggestion types were by default to add as child, then all of them automatically default to add as child. I don't have to click on this and change it. Everything that I've checked now, when I click accept, Flex is going to add that to the quote. And so I've seen people that have speaker package builders, video package builders. I've even seen people that have something that they call just an entire show builder. And they would put every item that they would possibly put onto a show into the suggestions tab, assign them to suggestion types, so that when they're building a quote, they're not dragging and dropping a bunch of individual items. They just drag and drop a single line item onto their quote, build their entire quote just by selecting checkboxes from a suggestions tab. And there's no problem with doing it that way. You still get your availability numbers. And when you click accept, it's telling me that there are some, I chose an item that has required suggestions, so I have to do that. But depending on how many items you chose, when you click accept, it will sometimes only take a few seconds, sometimes it might take a little bit longer to put all of those items onto a quote. Here's one thing that we'll look at kind of as our last part of our discussion on virtual items and suggestion types. You might notice when I was building these packages, it's a lot easier to make those look organized because I added everything as a child. Because everything that gets added is going to be part of that speaker package. That example is a little bit more dramatic and makes more sense when we go into something like auto sort mode. So if I'm adding a bunch of video stuff, it goes into a video subtotal. If I'm adding audio stuff like where the speaker package builder is, then that goes into an audio subtotal. And just for fun, let's just add everything. I know that's not very realistic, but just to see what it looks like. But everything gets added as a child to the speaker package, which is a child to the audio subtotal. And that works great. But when you get to something like this item, the build a breakout room, notice what's going on with all the suggestions in the build a breakout room. We have audio, we have video, we have power. We could even have lighting in here, staging. We could have any type of item that comes from any of my inventory groups. So if I'm in auto sort mode on a quote, I might want to keep that automatic sorting where these items go into their respective subtotals instead of just one big long list. I guess it depends on what you're doing, because if you're building per room, you might just want it to be one big long list per room. So what I mean by that is maybe I would start by creating a custom subtotal called room 1. Looks like I have caps lock on. Then just go to Insert Sort Mode. And then build a breakout room into that room. And it would just sort everything based on whatever sort mode I'm using. But if I'm just building an entire show or an entire breakout room but still want video, audio, lighting subtotals, what I can do is this. Let's go back to our suggestion types. And I created a suggestion type that's specific to the breakout room builder. And what you'll notice is that I'm using what we call the default sorting method for each one. So what that's going to do is if I choose this item as a suggestion on a quote, it's going to look at whatever default sort mode I have chosen. So if I'm on auto, then it's going to sort that item into its correct subtotal based on its inventory group. The other thing you might have noticed is that all of my breakout builder suggestion types are also required. And what that means is that when I add this to a quote and it pops up the suggestions window, the tab is going to be red and it's going to stay red until I choose at least one from that group. See that little pop-up? You must select at least one of the options from this tab. That's what it means when something's required. And if I don't choose something and I try to click accept, then Flex is going to say you must select at least one of the options from this group. And I could get out of that. I could cancel and just say it's fine. I'm not worried about it right now, but that cogwheel stays red until I've fulfilled all the required suggestions. So it's just a nice way for you to be able to see whether or not you've chosen something that's required from each group. But let's look at the example of, since all of these are using the default sort mode, and I'm in auto sort mode right now, I just want to show you what will happen. So I'm going to choose these two projectors. Again, I'm just going to indiscriminately choose a bunch of items here. It doesn't really matter. Quantities don't even really matter, I guess. But look at what's going to happen because it's using the relationship type or the default sort method. Once I click accept, everything that I chose is going to auto sort now into its respective categories. So there's audio. Down at the bottom we have power. And then there's the build a breakout room. But notice I line muted that by default, so the customer never sees that. They're just going to see the actual items that were added as part of that virtual model. So that's just a few ways that you can use virtual items. Again, we just had a very simple method of a virtual package, which was a 4-speaker package that could contain contents that go with it every time, and also some suggestions. We also looked at something like a speaker package builder. That's just a virtual model that's only built out of suggestions. It doesn't have contents that go with it every time. You choose what goes with it once you add it to a quote. And then we looked at an even bigger example, the build a breakout room or build a general session or whatever, where we add many items from different categories, add them to certain suggestion types, and then we looked at what the different suggestion types options are, like required, what's the association type, etc. And all of those just had a slightly different way of adding to a quote and just the way that you interact with those items. If you have any questions about this, I always recommend going to our forum. It's forum.flexrentalsolutions.com. Lots of good active users in there who have built things like this that might have good suggestions for you. If you have any more technical issues, then you can email support@flexrentalsolutions.com.